let's talk about writing quests. So you have some quests to write. You got some mainline sequence stuff, some side quests, some tutorials, lots of quests, but they're all structurally similar, so you look it up online. How do I write a good quest? You find some great advice. You start writing great quests. But that was never really the problem. Not according to me, anyway. Let's say you write 4 fantastic quests for your starting town. The player finds one. They are super impressed by the quality of your writing for this quest, and they come out of it feeling super enthusiastic about the rest of the game. And then they're like, and now what? Hello? Hello? Oh no. You forgot to tell the player what to care about, so they don't care about anything. Oh, I found another quest. Wow, that quest was great. What next? Oh no, nothing? This is like trying to drive a square-wheeled car. It doesn't really matter how good the engine is, the experience is going to be pretty rough. Like that. Every player has an experience. They move through your game. No player is playing a quest. Every player is playing a sequence of quests, and they're in the middle of that sequence. Every player has their own sequence, of course. It really depends on how your game is set up. Even if they're all doing the same quests in the same order, they're all going to have their own experience here. But regardless of what experience they're having, everybody's having it. And that means it often makes more sense for your individual quests to reinforce the sequence rather than be as good as possible. It's better to have a bad quest that makes your game flow better than a good quest that makes your game choppy. One way to have your quests contribute to the overall flow of your game is to have good quest handoff, which is what we're going to discuss today. If I ask you, what is quest handoff, you're probably going to say, well, it's when quest A hands you off to quest B, which is more or less correct, but there's some nuance here. The first kind of quest handoff might be the immediate handoff. So you do this quest. Oh no, my daughter, she's been missing, she's gone missing, help me find her. And so you go find the daughter. Turns out the daughter has been kidnapped by man-eating orcs. So quest A, find the daughter, hands off to quest B, kill the orcs. This is generally a pretty good approach because as the player does part of the quest, over here, part of quest A, they build up some emotional investment. And then you can immediately transfer that into quest B, which can now start with some emotional investment. And then you can go to quest C with that, plus this, and that would be even more emotional investment, at least in theory. This works well, as long as the player does it immediately. And this is the biggest weakness. For example, if the player rescues the daughter but doesn't fight the orcs and instead goes off and builds a house and then trades grain futures and then comes back, it's like, oh right, man-eating orcs. Good thing they didn't do anything while I was building my house. You can see how that really destroys the reality of the world. That's not great. But even if a player is intending to fight the orcs next, whether because you force them to at the structure of your game or because they want to, they might not. They might be like, all right, let's go fight the orcs. Oh, wait, I have to go change Jimmy's diaper. And I guess I better turn in early. I got a big day at work tomorrow. Oh, look, I'm having a big day at work. All right, back to the game. Now, this doesn't break the reality of the game because no time has passed in the game, but it does mean that the player has put some time between them and this original quest. So the emotional investment is now more distant. This is why when you see this sort of quest, it normally doesn't go quest A, then quest B, but instead what happens is quest A expands and cannot be completed without completing quest B. You don't rescue the daughter and then have the opportunity to go fight orcs. The daughter has been kidnapped by the orcs, and you have to fight them in order to rescue her. This, of course, it becomes a little bit more chunky as you expand it, and that's not great. You don't want to have to keep doing this because it's kind of clunky and it's not really that reliable. This is a short-range solution. This is something you do in very short bursts when you know it will work, when you need that emotional investment. But what are some other options? What are other kinds of handoff? Well, another kind of handoff would be the not-so-immediate handoff. Quest A causes Quest B, but you don't have to do Quest B immediately. Like, thank you for rescuing me. I am secretly the third prince of this kingdom. When you go to the capital, you should visit my mother the queen. She will make sure you are handsomely rewarded. Quest A causes Quest B, but you're not expected to go do Quest B right now. You're expected to go do whatever you want for like 12 hours and then get around to it. This is a very powerful structural move. It gives the player something to do in a new place or at a new time. So it's a very powerful way to set up the overall flow, but it's not going to capture very much of the emotional investment because so much time will have passed. People frequently will try and rescue some of that emotional investment by using reminders, like every time you get near the capital, you'll be like, oh, let me talk to myself for a bit. Remember how the queen owes me a favor for saving her dumbass kid? And then when you do meet the queen, she's like, thank you for saving my dumbass kid. Let's have a flashback. You get some power out of that, I'm sure, but the basic fact here is that the emotional investment will have long dried up by the time you get into the castle, because time has passed. You set it up specifically to allow for that. So this is a structural power move, but it doesn't have very much emotional power, according to me. Do we have any other options? Oh, we sure do. We can use world building, and this is one of the most underutilized methods of quest handoffs. World building is something that most games will want more of, so most games will try and put some world building into their quest lines. For example, let's say that you're training the player up with a basic tutorial. So there is, a scarecrow, and then the player has their starter sword. And the player is going to slash at that scarecrow. One of the more basic ways of creating the tutorial is to have a bunch of pop-up screens telling you exactly what's going on.
Press F to slash the scarecrow. This is what damage is. This is how you heal damage.
Whatever, right? This is a missed opportunity for world building, though, because you could have the old man that runs the place over here telling the player that stuff instead of just popping it up. This is an opportunity for us to do a ton of world building. We now meet a character. We establish that character. We know that if there is a feeble old man in charge of this adventurers guild, then this adventurers guild isn't considered very important, and people here probably have very peaceful lives. He's not some cool wizard or anything. He's just some old guy. So clearly we are in a very, very peaceful area. We can learn almost everything we need to know from a world building perspective without having any sort of dialogue about it. We don't have to actually be told that everybody's having a peaceful time or anything like that. We can build it just through the structure of how this character is introduced into the quest. And this is generally how you would try and approach your world building. You try and use characters and incidentals to build up whatever sort of mood and tone you want to have. This is not a bad tutorial quest. The idea of learning who's in charge of the guild and more about, the nature of the world and the town you're in, that's all pretty solid. How about another one? Well, after this, you need to go over to the blacksmith and learn how to do things like buy goods. So your blacksmith character is going to be set up during this quest. And it's some, grumpy lady with a big hammer, and she's like making stuff. And you get to learn a lot about incidentals there too. Is she making swords, or is she mostly making plowshares? Plowshares? Plows. Either way, she's making stuff that's not weapons, so you know that this area is super peaceful. Or maybe she actually smashes your sword. This sword's no good, snaps it in her bare hands. Take this sword instead. You can pay me later. You can really do a lot to help to build up both the character of the blacksmith and the character of the town itself in a quest line like this. But that's all quest writing. Where's the handoff? This is one of the most underappreciated parts of quest writing, in my opinion, because there is an enormous amount of power in the end of a quest. What happens when this quest ends? How does this quest end? We have the responsibility to roll any emotional investment from that quest forward as best as we can. And sure, it's just a tutorial quest, so there's not going to be a ton of emotional investment, but we still want to roll it forward. So how do we do that? Well, one option is for the old man to say, well, you slashed pretty good. I think you've graduated from a wooden sword. Why don't you go visit the blacksmith? And now you have an excuse to go visit the blacksmith. But that's a very cold trade-off, a very cold handoff. It doesn't really tell us what to care about. It just tells us what to do. Slightly better would be something like the sword snaps after you hit the dummy a bunch of times. And he's like, oh, your sword snapped. Guess you better visit the blacksmith. That gives us an in-world reason to do it rather than just being told to do it, but it's not an emotional reason to do it. Can we make an emotional handoff? In my opinion, the secret here is that we don't pass off from quest A to quest B. We pass off from character A to character B. Because the characters can absorb the emotional investment of these scenes, of these quests, without requiring you to go do another quest later. Let me give you an example. You go into the guild house over here, and you get told about the guild, and then there is a big patch of land behind the guild house where you go to learn how to wield the sword, and on the other side of that patch of land is our blacksmith. So you're out here with a training dummy and the old man is like, hey, Athena, whatever the blacksmith's name is, have you got any swords? We're out and this kid needs one. And Athena is like, here, my crappy blacksmith students suck, so I'm going to melt these swords down tomorrow. You can use them for today. What we've done is we've included a character from a different quest line into the first quest line, not in a motivating way. She's not critical, nor is her quest, but in a way that allows her to leech some of the emotional power of quest A and absorb it into herself, so that when you start quest B, you'll already be attached to her character, and therefore you'll already be attached to her quest. Now, this can be done any way you please. It's not really, I'm not telling you that this particular way of doing it is always the right way of doing it, but I am telling you, if you are trying to do fill quests, if you are trying to figure out how to do things that aren't core emotional beat quests, it often makes sense to think in terms of how you're going to sweep that power forward, how you're going to sweep the investment of the player's time forward. And one way to do that is to siphon it into something that drives the next quest, even if you don't actually tell them to do the next quest. Maybe the next quest isn't go buy a sword. It can be anything you want. Heck, maybe this is setting up the fact that you're going to become one of her crappy students. But you care that she exists. You know who she is, you know what she's like, and you know what her opinions are and where she, what sort of person she is within the town. You've set all of that up with a snap. And you set it up in such a way that she is interacting with something that you're doing in such a way that you put a little bit of that emotional investment into her. Now, I've set this up with, a character, but to be honest, you don't have to use characters. You can pretty much do it with whatever world building elements you'd like. For example, you could have it be some kind of political thing, where the guildmaster is like, well, I'd loan you a sword, but due to the big war, there's no swords around here, so here's a stick. just a little bit of feed into the fact that later there's going to be some quests about the big war, and you're setting that up. You're pushing a little bit of that emotional investment that you're building by doing a quest into something that's going to be important as a foundation for a quest later. To me, this is something that's much, much more important than writing a good, compelling quest. Creating this flow means that the player will always want to keep going. They always know what they care about, and they always know what they want to do next. And that's it. Let me know what you think. Bye.